Hello and welcome to the Science Fiction and Fantasy Marketing Podcast, the show where we help you establish your author brand, increase the size of your audience, and sell more books. I'm Lindsay Baroker, and I'm here with my two co-hosts.
I'm Jeff Poole.
And I was on mute. I'm Joe Lalo.
And we're off to an excellent start, as usual. And we've got a great guest for you this week, Christine Munroe. She has replaced Mark Lefebvre, who we've had on a couple times. Christine, are you still the, director in charge of author relations? Is that the title?
Sure. I don't know. I'm running Kobo Writing Life for all intents and purposes. That is my role, and that's what I'm focusing on. Thanks for having me.
All right. Well, thanks for being on. So anybody out there who's self-publishing may run into you or have questions for you. So we're going to talk a little bit about kind of some recent changes at Kobo, what's been going on there, what maybe we can take advantage of as authors, and maybe a little bit about audiobooks. I know you guys are getting into that. And also, we happen to be news topic. It happens to be that the author earnings report came out today, so we may touch on that, just a few highlights and see what Christine and everybody thinks. But before we jump into that, Christine, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you ended up as the new head of Kobo Writing Life?
Sure, thanks. So I've been with Kobo for 5 years now. And the 5 years before that, I was on the traditional side of publishing. I was in New York, fancy traditional publishing person, if you will. I started at a literary agent office and then focused on foreign rights. I sold foreign rights of English titles to European publishers mostly. And then I got more and more interested in self-publishing and what was happening at that time. It was obviously a really interesting moment for indie authors as more and more opportunities opened up. And I saw this role open up for a U.S. manager of Kobo Writing Life specifically. I'm actually Canadian, so I knew Kobo really well. And I was really excited about that brand, that retailer, what it meant for fighting this hard fight against Amazon. I wanted to be part of that. So I jumped at the chance and Mark hired me. And it's been a really fun, crazy ride from those startup days, as it was with Kobo at that time, to today, where things are really focused, more strategic. I feel like Kobo is a more grown-up company than it was when I joined in, I guess, 2013 now. And as time went on, Mark was kind of ready for a change himself, and he and I had been working really closely, and the opportunity came up for me to take over running the self-publishing platform. So it feels like a really big responsibility, a really exciting opportunity for me, and it's awesome. I'm really excited. So I took over in November. Great stuff. We have an awesome team and obviously amazing authors to support and grow going forward.
All right, very cool. See, now I'm starting to feel old because I'm like, I remember when Kobo Writing Life first came around because I used to use Smashwords to get into Kobo. So I've been with Kobo longer than you have.
You have. Yeah, it's true.
We'd love to ask you a little more about Kobo and how authors can sell more books. But since we do have this news with the author earnings report coming out, I thought I cherry-picked a few things to mention and maybe get your opinions on them.
Yeah.
And guys, as I said before we started recording, you're allowed to chime in and talk if you wish. Okay, first thing I thought was interesting that he mentioned was that for ebooks, release timing doesn't really matter. Like, it seems pretty steady throughout the year. With print books, there was back to school was real big because textbooks account for a lot of print books that are purchased. And they said, of course, before Christmas was pretty big. But there's been this myth in the indie author community and maybe in trad publishing too, that summers are slump time or it's horrible to release right before Christmas. Is Kobo kind of similar? Do you see that sales are fairly steady with ebooks all year round?
So I would say in general, Yes. However, the two exceptions for us at Kobo are July and that week of December right after Christmas. The week of Boxing Day in Canada is the 26th. That to New Year's is absolutely our biggest sales week of the year. That's not to say you should time a new release at that time of year, but that is our biggest sales week. And we have this weird phenomenon. It came up about 2 years or 3 years ago now, and it's been a recurring thing where we have a really big sales jump in July. So we kind of have these two big sales weeks, and otherwise things are quite steady, with a little bit of a slump in January. That kind of post-holiday purchase, people tend to tighten up the purse strings a little bit in January.
Yeah, I've noticed that the one time I made it the USA Today bestseller list off of a BookBub ad, it was January. I feel like that's kind of an easier
Oh,
time of year to maybe
yeah.
you don't need as many numbers to hit the list.
Shameless plug, shameless plug.
For BookBub, not for me. But
But
have
I
you
could do
guys?
that. That's an interesting silver lining to our cloud.
Well, yeah, I actually usually sell pretty well in January, but it may just be that like I just released a new series in that week after Christmas.
Mhm.
But I feel that makes sense that that's a busy time for ebook selling because a lot of people are off work and why not read? And they're
Yeah,
snowed in perhaps.
yeah. Well, for us, it's that big post-Christmas. You got your new device and you want to buy something. We see a lot of new customers engaging at that time.
All right, let me just ask Jeff and Joe, have you noticed with your releases any seasonal stuff, or is it just kind of like whenever you release a new book, it's probably going to be a good month?
Well, usually whenever I release, it's just going to be good. Usually a release will help bump all my other titles, but I've noticed usually November, December are really strong months for me just because I can only attribute it to it being holiday season there and people getting new devices and especially after Christmas, just like Christine was saying, it's I get a huge bump in sales there because apparently people are looking for stuff to put on those brand new toys they've got.
Yeah, as for me, because for my major releases, I tend to have a really long pre-order. It tends to just sort of the sales get mushed together into whenever I released, so it's not really pronounced a difference time of year. Although, I did release a book on April Fool's Day one year, which turned out to be a poor decision. So probably there are certain individual days throughout the year which might not be the best time to announce a release.
Tax day in the US. Maybe right after tax day, people have money.
The day after the presidential election was another day I released, and not the best decision.
Mm.
Yeah, people were too busy reading the news.
This latest presidential election or a previous one?
Yeah, the most recent one.
Yeah, I'd probably have to concur with that. That's probably wouldn't be the best timing.
All right. Well, overall, the report was saying that despite, the last couple of years, there's been some kind of doom and gloom in the community of people just having their sales go down and saying they're not selling as well. He basically found that indies are still doing really well and even improving a little bit. But it's been kind of a changing of the guard. He posted like the top 50 most highest earning authors, Amazon US sales, I think it was. And there were some names that were not at all surprising, and then a few people in there that had only 3 books out that obviously sold really well. And they were running this for 3 quarters, so about 9 months worth of data. And so have you seen anything, Christine, where it was very encouraging for newer authors, I think. I mean, there are a lot of really prolific people, and that's why they did really well, but it's not like you have to have been in the business for 10 years to sell well.
I think it's absolutely true. I saw a lot of parallels. We were talking before we launched about how Kobo data, I don't think was included in this report, but a lot of the top authors in that list are also our top authors. And I've been hearing from our, original authors that they're struggling and they think they point to the problem of KU versus wide, right, as the issue, and that the only solution is KU. I think this points to the fact that that's not necessarily true. There are just completely a new set of different authors who are not in those same forums, who are not out there evangelizing in the same way. who are making a whole lot of good money right now. For better or worse, I guess. Yeah. So part of it, you did mention prolific. There's a faster release schedule happening. I think that's absolutely true. This like rapid release behavior happening. And also I think that willingness to experiment in a way, to rebrand, do new covers. I think authors who've been in the indie game for a while maybe should just take it as an opportunity to look at their stuff and see, like, does it stand up to what's happening now, 8 years later into this whole adventure, and an opportunity to maybe rebrand, launch a new series, launch a new character to take advantage of the hunger of these new readers who clearly exist.
Right. It's like a lot of people were able to take advantage just by being kind of the early adopters and getting in there quickly. I've talked about before on here how I came in December of 2010 and I was like, man, I'm so late. Amanda Hawking was already a thing. Dave Conrad's making his $100,000 a month over here.
Yeah.
I'm going to be able to sell any books. But I've definitely seen that a lot of the authors that were killing it back then, sometimes I remember their names and I'm like, what are these people doing now? They haven't had a new release in like 3 months, or they're releasing books now, but they're not really doing that well. And so it does seem to be the people who are really paying attention with what's popular for cover design in my particular genre, and what kind of blurbs really are grabbing people, and they're willing to adapt. And we don't know how much they're spending on advertising. I'm sure some of those people at least are spending piles, but I know a couple of the real prolific ones that is their advertising. They actually don't spend that much, but they're putting out like 2 novels a month. It's kind of crazy for most of us. Even for me, I'm pretty prolific, but I'm like 2-3 novels a month. No, that's a little a little too much. Do you guys have any thoughts before I move on?
I don't know on this. No.
No, I didn't get a chance to read it too deeply.
All right. Well, I'll just share a couple of the stats that was interesting. That 7 of the top 100 selling ebook authors in the U.S. were self-published indies. 50 of the top 250 in the U.S. were self-published indies. 121 of the top 500 were indies, and 284 of the top 1,000. So by the time you got to 1,000, more than a quarter of the books were, or the quarter of the best-selling authors were indies. So that's a pretty good chunk of the pie there. So that's encouraging.
Yeah. And I can say from a Kobo perspective, in English geos, KWL is usually 20% of our sales, unit sales every day. Way more than any traditional publishing house, and growing every single year. And our net sales and margin are just really huge growth every single year. So yeah, to counter that idea that self-pub or indie is flatlining, we are absolutely not seeing it from my perspective. Not at all.
Awesome. And do you guys look at paperbacks at all, or are you just following ebooks?
Ebooks and now audio. Yeah, we launched audio in 2017, but not print right now.
Okay.
How we started was partnering with bookstores and print distributors. So we provide the ebook solution to that. That's always been our real brand identity. So we have not delved into print, and I don't see that happening anytime soon.
And do you also track books or ebooks that are coming to you through like Smashwords and Draft to Digital?
We do, yeah. And I'm starting to look at that more side by side, of how Kobo Writing Life is growing alongside those aggregators, because we do see all of that info coming our way. But I don't have info to share on that at this moment, but I do know those guys are still continuing to grow even after all these years, and providing a really awesome service to authors for sure.
All right, so it's encouraging. We actually last week was a bit of a down week. Mark had some negative predictions.
Did he?
Yeah.
I didn't get a chance to listen if you put it up already.
Oh, that's all right. But, Mark is just concerned about Amazon possibly trying to take over the universe. So that's always a topic that comes up. But one more little bit of data for people who are interested. The report showed that 90% of all romance purchases are ebooks, and 75% of all science fiction and fantasy are ebooks and audio.
Wow.
So ebooks are still where it's at, and maybe you mentioned audio too. What's going on with Kobo and audiobooks?
Yeah, so we launched audio in the fall of 2017. So it's a mixed subscription or a la carte purchases, a subscription offer. We're trying to be competitive with Audible, of course, as you have to be. And it's a big growing business for us. We're obviously investing a lot of our resources and marketing towards that. And this year, that's going to be the focus for KWL, getting audio uploading built into the dashboard. So that's something you will see from us in the first half of this year.
That was going to be my next question, because
Yeah.
I still have stuff that's either exclusive or with an audiobook publisher, but I want to, like with the next series I do, make it non-exclusive so I can start playing around. And Joe, you already have one, don't you, that you've uploaded different places?
Yeah, I've got 2 books that are in Find Away Voices, but the process was extremely slow, so I don't have any sales or anything on that yet.
Okay, what part of the process? I'd be curious.
That was slow.
Mm-hmm.
It was about a month between when I uploaded the files and when they officially passed quality control, and then there was another 10 days of rolling out to the stores. So it's only been probably about 2 weeks that they've actually been on sale, and I actually don't even know where the sales statistics will come in. I think it's going to be actually like an emailed file.
Interesting.
All right. We'll have to report back in a few months, and Joe can let us know if he's now a millionaire from
Keeping in mind, it's entirely possible that I will get no statistics because no one will buy my stuff. We never know. These are 2 of my less popular books.
Or conversely, if all of a sudden it does really well, Joe disappears next week and we no longer hear from him. So
he's just sailing the world on a year-long cruise. All right. Well, my last question for this little bit before we get into more of the marketing stuff is just, is there anything in the last year or so besides the audiobooks that's new at Kobo that people should be aware of?
That's a really good question. Anything new at Kobo that people should be aware of? I would just say that we are still growing, I think, counter to whatever Mark Hoker said last week, which I really need to go back and listen to, but that there are still retailers out there fighting the good fight and trying to provide an awesome e-reading experience to customers and succeeding at it. All hope is not lost, my friends. And there are some pretty awesome, exciting opportunities coming in 2018 that I can't talk about like quite now, but I think you'll hear some cool news coming very soon.
All right. And is the promotions tab something that's available for most authors at this point?
Yeah. So promos tab is something that still works really well for authors to get good traction on Kobo. It's something we're upgrading this year for the first time since launch. So that's a long overdue upgrade for authors to be able to search by genre, search by price, all the things we've gotten feedback on over the years. And so, yeah, it's right now still in beta mode, but most bigger authors are in it, and if they're not, they can email us at writinglife@kobo.com, and we will gladly roll that out to you. Other platform upgrade we did last year was give authors the ability to upload to Overdrive library access. So again, right now that's an exclusive access kind of thing, but we're rolling that out to all users next month. So if you don't have it right now and you're hearing this, you can email us and we'll give it to you, but otherwise you'll get it soon enough as well. But Overdrive is our sister company. If people don't know, Rakuten bought them last year or the year before. So we got the same terms you would get if you went direct, but without the hassle of having 2 accounts. No aggregator fee, no distribution problems. So you just click Enable Overdrive and you get 50% of the library price, whatever you set for your ebooks.
All right, cool. I got a question about the audiobooks that you've added. You mentioned that it's subscription and a la carte. I know one of the weaknesses of Audible is the inability to set your own audiobook price, which makes it really hard to run promos or anything like that. What's the, like, how is it handled with Kobo? Like, how's the pricing done?
Yeah, so right now we're in building mode, so gladly take that feedback. Honestly, right now publishers are setting their prices and we're selling it at the prices that they set. So I imagine we would mirror it for KWL, but we welcome any input that you have as we build this out and set up final models for rolling this out later.
Yeah, that's one of the main things about Audible is like we've had many people on the show trying to talk about how to promote your audiobooks, and because you can't set the price, like one of the big things about Findaway Voice is you can set your price, and if your audiobook is short, and then they price it, slightly above what the subscription fee is, no one's going to use the subscription credits on your book. So there's lots of pricing issues that happens when they set the price. So yeah, that's something that I think can differentiate people who are not Audible from Audible, is the ability to at least have some control over the pricing of your audiobook.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes sense. It's crazy. There's lots of crazy things about Audible, though.
Okay, I also have another question with regards to the audiobooks. I mean, you guys mentioned that you've been selling them for a while now, so I imagine you've been looking at some of the data. And my question would be what prereqs do you think authors should consider before trying their hand at creating an audiobook from one of the titles? I mean, number of followers, make sure your sales of your book are high enough, reviews. What would you guys say?
That's a really great question. I would absolutely say all of the things you mentioned: professional cover, professional editing, all of the kind of standard things, and what your goals are, right? That's always what it gets down to. How much do you want to invest in yourself in producing those files? It's not no cost. So how much are you making? How much are you hoping to make? There is some strength to doing a simultaneous release or a staggered release of ebook, audiobook, to have both of those files available at the same time. We highlight them on the same item page, also available as an audiobook. But if it's a first-time author with your first book out there, is it worth it to invest in audio for that book? No, probably not. You should be writing your next book and trying to get the catalog built.
Okay, so you mentioned that if by chance you happen to get the book and the audiobook out at the same time, they're given some extra special recognition on your guys' website?
They're linked on the item page, yeah. So when you look at an ebook listing on Kobo, it says also available as audio.
Right, and same thing for people on Amazon. It will have the paperback and the audiobook. And I've definitely noticed when I'd produced a series with my pen name last year, and even though it's such a slow process, it's really tough to have the audiobook and ebook ready to go at once unless you hold your ebook launch back for a couple months. But the closer you can release it to when the ebook is selling well, no surprise, the better the audiobook is going to do. But if it's like 9 months later and your ranking is dropped way down and you're not selling that many books, it's a lot tougher. I've just kind of seen anecdotally and from my stuff and other people that maybe if you're selling about 500 ebooks a month of a title, consistently, it's probably going to be worth it to do the audiobook, because you are looking at like anywhere from $2,500 to $6,000 and up, depending on the length. So as Christine said, it's definitely an investment.
Yeah.
All right, well, why don't we move into kind of the marketing stuff a little bit, and maybe we can get some tips for people how they can become one of these authors that's selling more books at Kobo. And I was encouraged to hear you say that some of the people on the list of the top 50 US authors are on Kobo too, and aren't just like, it's not like you have to be exclusive with Amazon in order to do really well. So I know you've done author interviews for the Kobo podcast, and you see what's working on Kobo to sell books. So do you have any tips, or what are some of the best practices that you see authors doing?
That's such a hard question. A good one, but like where to begin? I could talk for a long time about best practices, but I would say for starters, absolutely professional cover design. The people who can design their own cover, it's like 0.00001% of authors. And don't assume that you're that 0.0001%. So professional cover design, professional editing, and then work on writing your next book. Our top authors have at least 3 books, if not, 10. If you can, more books sell more books. That diatribe is correct for a reason. And series are still selling really well on Kobo. And something that's still selling well, that started kind of picking up for us about 1.5 or 2 years ago now, is these really big box sets. Authors started lumping together all of their titles in one big set. We don't have a cap on the 70% royalty, so you can, put 20 books in a box set, go as high as you want to go. We've found there's this niche audience who want to buy the whole series at one time. And it's not that hard for an author to put together all of this content you've already created with a new cover, and that's just adding more to your content catalog. So I encourage you to do that. And then in the promos tab, we're actually running fairly often now box set specific sales, because we do find customers really like that stuff and they're willing to pay for it. So I'd recommend looking into that if you have series or have a lot of titles. There's a million different ways to do that. If you have a bunch of series, you can do series starters sets where you do the first book and a bunch of different series in one box set. Couple different series, first 3 books, whatever you think is going to work for you and your brand. I encourage you to look into that stuff with a flat cover instead of a 3D cover. 3D just does not work well for us. We're not quite at the point of like forbidding it. Some people have gone that far, but it's worth thinking about, and I would discourage it. Other best practices: link to Kobo, tell your fans you're available at different retailers. I often hear from authors saying, why am I not selling? And then you go to their website and they're only linking to one other spot. Make sure it's easy for your readers to find you everywhere that you are. And if you're running ads, try some ads to different retailers. If you're doing the BookBub new ads, try doing those specific to Kobo. I hear a lot of authors saying that those are going extremely well, linking to Kobo, looking specifically at free or 99-cent books. So those are a few ideas that I think are working well. Have you tried any of those, or would you agree?
I've got 3 book box sets, and I actually have gotten the cover art ready for an 8-book box set as soon as I write the 8th book. Because I do want to try that. I know Joanna Penn is big on the, do the $30 8-book box set of your series on Kobo, and I think Apple too.
Yeah,
doesn't have the cap. So I'm going to try that, and I have tried I did 4 books, 4 book ones of different series in one box set, and I stuck a brand new novella in there, so I could hopefully get the people who've already read all the book ones to still get the box set to help it sell more copies. Awesome. So I found that useful, and I haven't tried BookBub ads to Kobo yet, because my pen name is in KU, and that's what I tried those with. But I totally believe that would work, because so many people are in KU now. They're only going to be advertising to the Amazon sites. So it seems like that doing Apple and Kobo, I think they even let you do Google Play, would probably be less competitive, and maybe you're paying less for clicks.
Yeah, I think it's paying less for clicks, and the readers are thirsty for good deals.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And I noticed even on Amazon that with my last release that I don't think anybody's advertising to like Amazon Canada or Amazon Australia, because there's no AMS system. So you have to either do the BookBub or the Facebook. I noticed my ranking was a lot better in those stores. I was like, wow, I'm 51 in the whole Canada store.
That's awesome.
No, it was only like 10 books a day and 10 borrows or something, but it was still, I'd never got that high with fantasy or anything in Amazon.com. So it seems like you could take advantage of the fact that so many people are exclusive with Amazon. So hey, less advertising competition over here.
Amazing. I love that.
All right, I'll pass you to Joe here.
Yeah, so I'm not direct to Kobo. I get to Kobo through Smashwords, but I've been lucky enough to have been involved in a lot of promos, seasonal promotions and stuff. It seems like
Mhm.
Kobo is has a lot more accessible promos than a lot of retailers. Can you talk a little bit about what sort of promos you run and why?
Yeah. Um, so I think the number went out today in our internal presentation. We had something like 88 million promotions globally last year. It was an absurd number, like a lot of promos going on. So I can't speak to all of them. But specific to indie titles, we often try and look at offering a % off promo code at checkout, so authors don't ever have to change their price. We know price matching is a big issue across retailers, so that's one big thing we look at. So we have monthly promos is our main one. It's often genre specific, and if it's themed with a specific month, I don't know if there's some kind of thing going on seasonally. We have a daily deal on the page globally every single day. And we also have a double daily deal, which is like a bonus deal. It's usually a very steep discount. So like an $8.99 book down to 99 cents. So that's where those box sets get interesting if you're not typically pricing your book that high. And let me think if there's any other ones that I want to point to. We also have a lot of free promos. We don't require exclusivity to price free anytime. We have a big free page that we do paid promo spots for. So we have highlight spots for every genre, and we update those every week, and we see pretty good conversion from first free and series.
Like many other authors, I see my sales at Kobo steadily rising, and being a huge fan of Smashwords, I was wondering if you encouraged authors to try and establish relationships directly with you guys at Kobo instead of going through someone else.
Yes, absolutely. For a bunch of reasons. Number one, control. You have access to a very easy, fast system. KWL, we often hear, is one of the easier platforms to use. And you get access to the promos tool, which you don't get if you're going through an aggregator, and you get your full royalties. That 15% adds up over time. And if your sales are growing, I think you should keep that money for yourself.
Good to hear.
You mentioned that free books still do pretty well there, free series, like book one series starters. But I have a question for you, because I know there's people out there that are like, I only have one book out, or I don't do series.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any suggestions for people who are just trying to market standalone books?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and a little bit of a tricky one. It's definitely not the norm in terms of indie titles, but I don't think it's not important. We still see standalone titles doing well in store. So I think for authors doing standalone titles, you should still keep writing your next book, even if it's not related to that first book, to build your catalog and have readers have something waiting there for them. If they fall in love with you, that they know that there's going to be another book waiting. And we still offer those same opportunities. You could still get a daily deal. You could still get a monthly promo spot. We don't discriminate just because you're not producing series. And actually one of our biggest, most read books on Kobo last year was this French KWL title by an author named Julie de Lestrange. And it's a standalone summer romance. She has not published anything else. It's one book. She sells gangbusters over and over. She sold great over Christmas. She just markets the heck out of that book. So I think there's absolutely great opportunity for those standalone, really compelling, interesting stories.
Yeah, and if once you get more standalone books, you can still, I've actually heard people advise, like, find a way to kind of make it a series, even if it's like whatever you always do, strong female characters, or there's always a mystery, maybe you can call them something, kind of tie them in and publish them as do you guys have like a series page the way some of the retailers do?
Yeah, so not in the way that you could like edit the like metadata for that page yourself, but even if it's not an official series, you could give it a series name and it would link on the item page. So within each ebook, if you wrote, the summer standalone series or something, then it would say, more from this series, and it would link to all of the other books. It's still in your hands to link those books however you think is appropriate for readers.
All right, good. And I've found with the romances, which often lend themselves to being standalone, like you have to pull some tricks to make like a cliffhangers in a series, that just the good old advice of putting like the first chapter of the next book in the back of the, even if it's not the same characters, people they may just keep reading and then decide they're going to buy it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, I actually got an email about this from somebody asking for advice, but let's say that you've written a standalone book and it's of considerable length, like 200,000 words plus. Is splitting it into multiple titles the best decision? Because the concern here was, maybe cliffhanger would turn people off. Or is there an argument for longer titles?
That's hard. I think there is, if you want to give it a really high price. But economically, I've seen authors break this down. Kevin J. Anderson breaks this down at his Superstars of Writing seminar. If you work out the math, it makes sense to break it out over a series, unless that's going to sacrifice the integrity of the novel itself, I think. What do you guys think?
Well, that was my advice, was that like, if you're trying to make it a career and you can make the individual parts a satisfying hunk of narrative, then I recommended breaking it up. And if you're looking to price higher, then you can keep it as one, but you can't price it too much higher if it's just the one book. So in terms of money making and marketing, breaking up a gigantic book into smaller bite-sized portions is usually my recommendation.
Mm-hmm.
Especially if the story naturally would break apart at that point. Otherwise, you're just having a really unusual break and like, okay, now I'm passing myself off as being greedy as hell and go ahead and buy my next book or something or other. So my question for you is, do you have any thoughts on what pricing strategies work best at Kobo? I mean, short stories, for example, short stories at $2.99, epic fantasies at $4.99. And have you noticed any patterns of what works best?
It's a great question, and I think one that's different depending on, the length for sure, and where you're at in your career. I think some of the established indies are finding they can command higher prices and are inching it up over time. In general, KWL's average sale price is raising over time, and traditional published titles is lowering over time, so we're seeing that gap get smaller and smaller. So I would say average sale price for a standalone, you can be comfortable staying between $3.99 and $5.99, depending on, how long, what your brand is. But I think it's still an opportunity for experimentation in your hands to try out a price. It doesn't have to be your forever price. I think you should try it. If it's not working, try to raise it, lower it. You have that flexibility. I encourage authors to do that, especially people who've been in the game for a while. If you're finding your sales aren't working out, consider changing that in one direction or the other. What have you guys found works for you?
Well, last week, actually, Mark was mentioning that he saw that $4.99 was becoming a more viable price point, whereas before it was like $2.99, $3.99, but it seems like a lot of authors are inching their price up, and
Oh, yeah.
it's not really, they're not taking a big hit in total sales numbers.
Absolutely agreed. Or they see a slight unit dip, but the difference in revenue makes up for it.
I love starting like a new series with a free or a 99-cent one, but then after that, it matters less how many of each copy. Like, you want to maximize your earnings, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
you're not too worried about book 7 appearing high on the top 100 for steampunk or whatever, because people are going to want to be looking for book 1s anyway.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've kind of been in the $3.99 price range for a while for stuff under 100K, but now I'm just like, nah, almost everything I'm going to try $4.99. So why not?
Awesome.
So we saw in the author earnings report that he mentioned that about 75% of all the sci-fi and fantasy being sold was either ebooks or audiobooks. How are those genres doing at Kobo? I guess especially Kobo Writing Life. Are you seeing pretty strong sales there too?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd say romance obviously got out of the gate fastest in terms of genres. Mystery thriller somewhat close behind, and we've seen that genre really grow. And now I think sci-fi and fantasy is having its time right now, and it's a really exciting opportunity. And I think honestly, like, so many of these genre authors are in KU that I think it's a really opportune time to look at being wide as like an opportunity to find these new hungry readers at other retailers. But we're seeing really big growth in terms of sales in these genres.
Do you have any? I didn't ask you ahead of time, so you probably didn't have time to sneak a peek. But if any of the subcategories maybe seem like an opportunity because they're less competitive, or the readers are not getting enough of what they're looking for?
I don't have that info offhand. I could look into it tomorrow and send you guys an update. I don't know if you have show notes online or anything, but I can see what stats I can dig up for you and share.
Sure, we definitely put up the show notes, and when I'm on top of my game, I try to get questions out to people early, especially if they're going to be digging through data, possibly.
Sounds good.
All right. So I am curious. People always talk about when they're launching a book at Amazon that, oh, I hope this sticks, and then the algorithms kind of sell it on its own. Is there any equivalent like that at Kobo? Anything people can do to just hope that they're selling enough books and they'll keep selling, maybe even after they stop advertising?
Yeah, so I will say it's a really different game, and I've seen a lot of authors start talking about this more, like David Gaughran's talking about this, and the authors who've been wide for a while are kind of switching their strategy talking about this. But it's not the same kind of peak and drop off that you see in Amazon across retailers. We see more of just a steady build, honestly. So I think the investment you put in to retailers when you're wide lasts longer. So, sticking to whatever strategy you have will pay off. What absolutely does not work is when authors are meddling, putting books in and out of exclusive and coming back. That has really catastrophic results. And I'm not just saying that to say keep your books wide or whatever. It really has a strongly negative impact, and it's very hard to rebuild your audience. So what works is to stay on your promos, keep doing what I was talking about before, promote to all of your retailers, target ads to audiences globally, keeping in mind where retailers are strong in different geos. Kobo's main ones being, Canada, UK, Australia, Japan were huge. So if you're targeting ads in those geos, make sure you're looking at Kobo and linking to your books there.
Earlier we were talking about how romance was early out of the gate as a successful genre, and it's a perennial winner for book sales, and as a result, potentially can be guilty of slipping to the top of genres that really have a dubious claim to that book. You'll very frequently see the top 1 or 2 spots in any subgenre be a romance that probably doesn't belong there. Does Kobo do anything to sort of keep authors honest in that regard?
Oh, that's so interesting. I haven't really heard of that, honestly, to be honest.
It's the sort of thing you notice if you're checking your ranks after a release.
Obvious, for sure. I understand. We feed off of customer feedback, I guess. And so if we hear an author or reader saying, this is not the genre that you say it is, we'll flag it and send that feedback directly to the author. But otherwise, we've talked about that. It's just honestly not a problem that we face that often. I know we're not dealing with quite the scale that Amazon is, for example. But most of our authors are trying to target the readers that they're trying to target. And if they're not, it's like even a more nefarious thing that I don't think we have to get into here. Hopefully your readers or your listeners, are not doing that kind of stuff. But like putting out really dubious content and flagging it as completely something else, as a weird effort to try and stump the reader, but not as a way to game the ranks, if you will.
Now, obviously, it seems like the answer to this is pretty clear, but do you feel like fudging the genre with the potential of, in order to try to get a hungrier audience is worth doing, or do you think that the potential backlash of people getting something other than the way expected is more than offsets what would have been gained by rankings?
I would absolutely say the latter. And gaming the rankings is not as much of the game at Kobo. I would absolutely say, you're going to get negative feedback. You'll get negative reviews, and that stuff stays forever. It's going to hurt you way longer in the long run versus just spending your energy on trying to get the readers who are going to appreciate you and your books in the long term. Focus on that. Absolutely.
So let me ask you this. Have you noticed any seldom used genres that are increasing in popularity? For example, a rise in lit RPG, space opera romances, anything that you don't typically see, but more and more people are writing in them now.
Yeah, so I think it's a little similar to Lindsay's question, and I think I want to dig into that data a little bit more and get you guys some info. Hopefully you can put it in the show notes. But I think space opera and all of those subgenres of sci-fi fantasy are an opportunity just broadly to get your content out there. We need more of that.
All right, cool. Well, you mentioned that, of course, Kobo has a lot of international sales, and I've seen the little map on my own dashboard that they come from all over. Do you have any tips for actually advertising specifically to different audiences around the world to maybe try to get more readers in New Zealand or wherever, especially, English reading markets would probably be preferable for most of us who are not putting our books also out in Spanish and French?
Yeah, so I think with the marketing opportunities you're already using, so BookBub, Facebook, a lot of them have geo-specific targeting, and a lot of authors don't take advantage of those. They look at US, maybe Canada, and don't look elsewhere. And there is absolutely a big opportunity there to build in other geos. And then if you are getting pretty big, to think about translation. I still think that's a huge opportunity that it has not yet been adequately tapped by indie authors. Obviously, it's an investment. You have to invest in the translation, and then you have to market yourself in a whole new language where you don't have an online presence, you don't speak the language, presumably. So it is an endeavor, but it's something to think about if you're starting to see big revenue and you want to see actual global growth. I think the opportunity is really there, and to look at other geos. For example, Bol is our big Dutch partner. We have a Kobo subscription plan there called Kobo Plus, and 90% of our sales in that program are Dutch. So there is a big hunger for ebooks in other languages that is growing in a really big way.
Yeah, I meant to ask you about your subscription program. Is it going to be rolling out in other countries? Or I feel like was it you said that the reason that you're doing it there is because there was so much piracy?
Yeah, it's absolutely true. The Dutch market is crazy. There's a bunch of target markets people have talked about, the Netherlands, India, China being a couple key ones that always get tossed around. But yeah, the Netherlands, there's a ton of ebook piracy. So we rolled out the subscription program. It's going extremely well. We launched it last year. The model is going really well. It's a little bit different in terms of a rev share. We think of it as a win-win-win between us publishers and Bowl being our partner. And it's one we do look at rolling out in other geos. We have not mapped out what geo the next would be yet, so it would be early days to look at expansion, but I think we're laying the groundwork for potentially a bigger thing. But obviously with lessons learned from other ebook subscribers who have come before us and the woes that have befell them all.
Right. Now, speaking of international markets, obviously there's not a lot of indies who are looking to produce their own translation, but sometimes we're approached by people who want to do translations. Do you feel as though your English language sales in a country that is not a native English speaker, are those a good indicator of how you'll do if you translate there, or are the native and English markets not necessarily aligned?
It's a really good question. It absolutely differs per country. The Netherlands being an interesting example because it is a almost 50-50 market. When you see a print edition come out, often it'll be like the English and Dutch edition side by side. It's so split. But then in ebooks, it's way more Dutch. So I think it's honestly early adoption moment for a lot of those geos. But there are areas of South America, for example, that I think launching a Spanish edition would have a totally different impact than launching your English edition. So I think it's hard to make one blanket statement for different languages and different geos as different countries adopt, at their own pace to this whole crazy thing. It's really interesting. I feel like US specifically has been in this game for so long, but a lot of countries are still just now getting ebooks and apps and getting on the e-reading experience train for the first time now.
All right, so I have another international type question for you. Aside from English, do you have any information on what translations sell the best at Kobo?
What translations sell the best?
Yeah, what other books translated, like say the German books do the best, or the Spanish books sell the best? Stay put. The Spanish books stay the best or sell the best there, and dog's getting ready to jump down. But I was just wondering if you knew which ones sell, aside from English, sell the best there.
The three I would look at, I mentioned Dutch, that's a big opportunity. French. In France, our big partner is Fnac. We have a very strong brand partnership there, and Spanish. So I think it's genre specific, a little bit, and yeah, just what you want to invest, right? If someone's coming to you and saying they're going to translate your book for free, that's a pretty cool opportunity. I would absolutely consider, depending on what rights and strings are attached, obviously, with any opportunity. But yeah, those would be the three highlight languages. There are authors, though, who I know, for example, if you speak German, if you have some kind of interesting link where you can leverage that in a marketing opportunity, that would be a different thing to consider. All of these questions, it's so individual to you, your ability, your resources, all of that stuff. Lindsay, have you done translations? What's your situation there?
I have only one where a reader was German and a translator and offered to translate my book for me, and she did, the first one in my Emperor's Edge series, and then she also found a publisher over there. Joe's actually had better results as far as sales. The publisher put out the price was pretty high, and I didn't have any say on the cover or anything like that. So they only ever did that one book. They weren't chomping to do the whole series. But it's something I would definitely do if somebody approached me and wanted to have the foreign rights. I say that even though I've turned that down because they usually only offer $500, and that's what it would cost to get an IP lawyer to look over it. But it's something I would definitely like to do more of in the future. And Joe, do you want to talk about your German translation at all?
Sure. I actually they approached me first asking for the Book of Deacon trilogy, which is perennially my bestseller, and the first one did unusually well. It stuck in the top 150 or so for Amazon Germany for like a while, and they were therefore understandably interested in continuing the partnership. And so I think I just sold the 5th book in the series to them. And then, so the German translation has done really quite well. And prior to the translations, I have been doing pretty well. Just the English sales in Germany, it was for a long time, it was my second best country. So yeah, I've found that the translations tend to be a pretty good idea if you can get your hands on them.
And Joe won't mention to Christine that his publisher put it in KU.
In German?
Which is why it did so much better, probably. But your publisher also did it at like $3.99. I think mine was like $8.99.
Yeah, I've heard that going either way.
Yeah.
Some of the German KU stuff does crazy gangbusters, and some really does not. I don't know.
All right. Well, we're coming up on an hour, so I just have one more question for you from me here. You're probably ready
Time
for bed.
flew. It's all right. I don't know where the time went, but you guys had great questions. Thank you.
All right, good. Well, my last one for you is just that, on Amazon, we've seen people do the rapid release with like a book 1, 2, 3 in a series, maybe holding back and then publishing a week apart. Does that help at all on Kobo? Do you see people that are coming out of the blocks just killing it because they had like the first few books in a series ready to go out like that?
Absolutely. I think the rapid release works, especially if you plan and market for it, right? So if you have those release dates scheduled, so the whole machine is kind of rolling, and you let us know when things are scheduled. We always love to hear from authors. Obviously, we keep an eye on what's being released and what the pre-order dates are, but don't ever hesitate to be in touch with us to let us know if you have a big project like that rolling out. But yeah, if you have three books or 4 books and they come out every 2 weeks or something, yeah, we've seen really big results. I think that binge reading thing is absolutely working right now.
It's surprising because sometimes you would think, oh, people can't read that fast, or and I actually did that last summer because I had my Fallen Empire series had been in KU, and so I was taking it out and putting them up on Kobo and the other sites pretty quickly. I had to wait for the dates of the contract to become available, and people would complain like, where's book 5? Hello. And I'm like, I just put out book 4 last week. But I think they search, they're like, wait a minute, it's at Amazon, you punk, what are you trying to pull? So for people that are trying KU to launch a series and then they want to go wide, I would definitely wait until you can kind of put the whole thing out there either at once or really rapidly like that.
Mm-hmm.
Not that we advocate KU here.
Oh, whatever.
We like all the retailers equally.
All right, so
Jeff. Who doesn't like anybody? No, doesn't like certain retailers.
All right. So speaking of that's rapid release. When I was at the Oregon conference a while ago, there was a lot of talk about consistency of release. I'm trying this, and I've heard some people with success with it is even if it's not a full-length novel, just releasing at least one thing a month, and sometimes releasing it on the same day every month to sort of create author expectations. So do you think that consistency has an impact on your overall sales?
I would say the two sides of that coin, consistency, yes. If you have a rhythm, however often that is, that works for you, right? I see some authors racing to keep up with the pace right now and burning out. And obviously that's not going to work well over time. But the worst thing to avoid is inconsistency, right? So if you do a bunch of releases and build up that expectation and then drop off, I would say just do what you can to do what works for you and you think you can maintain, so that your readers know what to expect going forward.
Okay, so my final question for you is, obviously, since you've been at Kobo now for, you said 5 years, you've clearly seen a lot of material come, through your way there. Can you possibly give us any indication on what not to do when trying to get your books to do as best as they can there at Kobo? Like lousy covers, typos on the blurbs, stuff like that?
Those are absolutely true. Yeah. Unprofessional cover is not going to get you very far. Trying to game the system, really obviously keyword padded subtitles, that kind of stuff. We really don't allow that, and we're going to flag it, or our customer as well. Inconsistent category, pricing for the length, all of those unprofessional things, The end of the day, your goal is to sell your book to the readers who want to read it. So do the things to make that happen. Don't try to play games or game the system. Those are the main things. And then be in touch with us. I think that's the one thing that we really try and offer that some other retailers don't or can't. We want to hear from you. I want to hear from you. Be in touch. We really merchandise the store in a personal way. So we try and play a collaborative role in helping authors build their business. And that's something that we're really proud of to still be doing all these years later.
Do you get many authors that reach out to you on a daily or weekly basis?
Honestly, not professional ones.
Ah.
I have some pain points. I won't name any names, but I would very much welcome the opportunity to hear from authors more often. If you have something in the back of your mind itching, like, why has no retailer done this before? Or I use Kobo Writing Life, and every day this makes my life hard. Why can't you just make this little change and make the platform easier for me? Like, let us know. We want to hear that stuff, and that's the stuff that we're trying to improve, truly. So I always welcome that feedback, please.
Professionally. Why are my books selling more Kobo? I don't understand.
Yeah, and then only send the link to your books on Amazon. Yeah, we get that all the time. It's tricky.
All right. Well, thank you so much for answering our questions today. We don't have any chat questions since, just to let you guys know, we've been kind of banned on the live streaming on YouTube. Apparently somebody flagged us for something. So we're trying to get that straightened out, and hopefully we'll be back live streaming so we can do the chat and have the chat participants ask questions of our guests. If anybody has anybody you know at YouTube that can make that happen, feel free to pull some strings, because apparently we're not important enough.
Oh, no.
But thank you, Christine. And do you have any final, any projects you're working on at Kobo, or anything you'd like to tell our folks about before we sign off here?
I think stay tuned. There might be some bigger announcements coming soon. From the powers that be. But I can plug our blog, kobowritinglife.com, or the platform if authors aren't familiar with it. I encourage you, if you're using an aggregator or NKU, just to explore it. See, it's pretty easy. kobo.com/writinglife, and be in touch with us. As I said, we'd love to hear from you.
All right, cool. And you have a podcast too, right? The Kobo
We
Writing
do.
Life podcast. You got to plug that.
Got to. Thank you. We release every 2 weeks, typically with a big author or an industry pro of some kind or another to offer specific to indie tips.
All right, very cool. And I should mention that one of my favorite episodes on there was just like Mark talking about how to use free. I think he did one of my 6 different ways authors are using free. So I enjoyed that, and I hope other people will check out the podcast and the guests and such.
Yeah, we just did a cool one too. It was behind the scenes, following a book loosely through the publishing path at Kobo. So who the people are who touch the whole process and what they're doing this year to make it a smoother, easier one for authors. So that was our 100th episode, and one that was pretty cool.
Sounds interesting.
Very cool. I will put the link to the Kobo Writing Life dashboard in case anybody who's through Smashwords wants to maybe try uploading direct with the next series. Or if they want to check out the blog or the podcast. This is going to be episode 167 for us.
Whoa.
So if you guys come by marketing,
more mature than us.
marketingsff.com if you want the show notes, and we will put a the links to the Kobo stuff. And if Christine, if you do come up with any data that we kind of put you on the spot, you know, how's the steampunk westerns doing right now? Do you not know?
I wish I knew, but honestly, with that question, it's always like, write what you want to write at the end of the day. That's always my advice. Don't try to write to the genre that's the gap or the opportunity right now. Right? What
I could see Joe over there going, I wonder if I could put my steampunk into paranormal romance and maybe get a few readers.
No way.
All right, but we will sign off on that note. And thanks everyone for listening, and thanks for joining us, Christine.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for all the info, Christine. It's nice meeting you.
You too.
So long, everybody.